All right, we're back for another week, another episode. This week we got Nick back. Last week Nick was not here due to unforeseen circumstances, but
I
he's
was
back.
sorting my
And
tax bill out and my
yeah,
visa. Yeah,
he was
sorry.
uh he was trying to escape the big man, around
Trying
town.
to
And
trying to ensure my future survival in Hong Kong.
all right, all right, all
Otherwise, I
right.
might
We're
get
gonna get
kicked
to
out.
Hong Kong today because UFC 255. We have the first Hong Kong born based fighter to ever.
Born, raised, based. Yeah, all of them.
All right, all right. So, but anyways. This is the SCMP Live Chat. Today we have Aaron Bronsteter. Thank you, Aaron, from TSN for joining me. This is the first time I've ever spoken with Aaron. Usually most of my guests I've spoken with them or have done shows previous, but I'm very excited for this one because it's always nice to meet new people in the industry, and I have a lot of respect for you. You've been doing a lot of great work, and you've pretty much blown up in the last, I don't know, do you feel that? Do you feel like you've kind of blown up and had your face, out there and more visible than ever?
I kind of got lucky with working for a major network in Canada, right? So before I started doing MMA coverage, I was working at TSN doing other things, working behind the scenes and things of that nature. So, I think that the work is what gets me there. I think that having the platform is a big part of it as well. I think that being part of TSN, the TSN family, a big brand like TSN, that's a rights holder for the UFC, I think that certainly helps put me in a position to succeed. But the rest of the legwork, I feel like, I've worked really hard to get to where I am. I just started covering the sport about 3-4 years ago. And when I first started, I had about 1,500 followers on Twitter, and now I'm nearing 30,000. So, it's just a matter of putting in the work. This is my life. I do this day in and day out. I'm watching all kinds of different interviews, including yours. You do a lot of great interviews that are incredibly valuable for my own research. So I appreciate all of your hard work. And I just live, eat, and breathe covering the sport and reporting on the sport. I love it. And there's no other job. I was talking to my wife recently, and she was like, what, like, is there any job on this planet that you would take other than the one you have now? I said, no, there's nothing I would rather be doing than this job in the entire world. And I'm just so blessed to be able to say that when I'm sure that 99.99% of people would say otherwise.
Yeah, that's definitely true, 100%. Now with you, you were at a lot of events, over the last couple years, and you did a lot of great interviews, but then all of a sudden this pandemic hits, and there are no events, and even like the work in the studio has been dwindled down to pretty much nothing, like you said before we started. How has that affected you? Do you think it's more of a positive or a negative?
I think it's a positive in terms of my growth and my evolution in terms of my career. I'm kind of a chameleon. Like any sort of situation that I'm thrown into, I can adapt to. And when this situation took place, I wasn't like, oh, what's going to happen? Like, I'm not going to get to travel. And I just adapted right away. I started doing interviews from my basement and got a whole setup going and just learned the software, learned how to do things. Every day I'm changing and evolving what I'm doing. Even today, I was like working with lighting. I was getting so annoyed watching videos of me where the glare was coming off my glasses.
Mhm.
And I spent so much time today just researching, like, how do you get rid of the glare? And I did it today. But that's all part of it, is just trying to make things better on my own, just trying to learn how to improve my own situation. So I miss the traveling dearly. I love going to the events. I love covering it. That's where I feel like I do my best work, when I'm face to face with people. But I think that being able to do what I've been doing since March, just being at home covering it remotely, has really helped sharpen my tools. Doing remote interviews, I've gotten better at that. I've gotten more resourceful in terms of setting things up. So all of these different things that have put me in, all of the different things that have come from being in this position, I feel are completely invaluable to me. Like, I just think that it's going to help me so much more in the long run. And sometimes you get into a groove, you get into a rhythm. And I think it's good to get out of that rhythm sometimes and try new things and try to challenge yourself to improve. That's what I think keeps people from getting better and better at what they do.
Yeah, when the pandemic first started, I noticed that you were doing a lot of the combat and coffee. How come you don't do that anymore? It seems like you don't do that as much. You did do that for a while.
Yeah, I just shifted my energies. I felt like doing that on a day-to-day basis put undue pressure on me
Mhm.
to deliver live content every day, when I was spending more time instead doing more research, learning about the guests that I was going to have, looking ahead to the events. But doing that early on was really good because it gave me the opportunity to do live interviews and get more work where I'm live. You can't shut it down. If anything happens, you gotta be able to fill time. All of that stuff is it just completely helped me evolve in this role. So I'm just every week it seems like I'm trying to do something that's a little bit different from what I was doing the previous week to improve my situation. And I think that was something that I did really early on to just kind of show that I could do something from home and continue to do this job in an effective way and connect with new people, meet new people. Like John Gooden, I'd spoken to once in person at an event. Ended up having him on Coffee and Combat, and we just chatted for like 45 minutes. But before and after that interview, we really got to know each other, and I really liked John a lot. But those kind of things wouldn't have happened had I just been, going into the office every day, traveling to events. These are new relationships I'm able to build and new skills I'm able to build as a result of the situation. I'm grateful for it.
When you go to live shows and events and do work there, how important is that for your growth as a member of the media? Because I feel like for myself, I've only been to a limited number of shows live and covered shows live. And I feel like I need more of that to be better at what I'm trying to do. This remote thing, like I'm pretty good at it, I think. I don't know, but some people say I am. But what do you think, man? Like the live shows, isn't that crucial for to grow your visibility, I guess? And I think you did it perfectly.
Well, I'd be one of those people that agree that you do a great job remotely, but you're right. I mean, it certainly helped. I felt like I was getting my best content when I was on the road. The stuff that resonated the most with people. It's on the scene. It's got immediacy to it. I'm face to face with the people. It's really hard to replace that kind of experience and that kind of work. I think that being able to do that was really what helped grow me to where I'm at right now. I mentioned off the top, I had about 1,500 followers, and now it's around 30,000. I think that getting really good content on the ground was what really helped build me as a reporter in the sport. And I think that getting out video clips right away, getting out video clips of Dana White saying things that he hadn't said to anybody before, those kind of things, those being shared and those being spread around, that's what really helped grow me. But now I feel like this has just been a year of development. This is almost, because I can't travel, I have to continue to build my arsenal of the things that I can do and do well and just improve those. Listen, we're in a circumstance here where there's nothing I can do about it. It's outside of my control. Right now in Canada, if you travel, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks. I'm not really eager to travel, honestly. I look at this pandemic, and it's certainly not a great situation where I would want to leave my house. My kids are at virtual school. All of these different things contribute to that. So I'm just working with what I have to work with, and I don't think TSN wants to send me to events either. It's just risky, right? So I think that having this opportunity to learn new things and get better at certain things and work with new technology has just been such a welcome thing for my life and my career.
When I think of your coverage, at shows, there's two moments that come to my mind. Is the moments, that one moment with Israel Adesanya where you guys basically reacted live to what was it, Jorge Masvidal's flying knee knockout of Ben Askren, and the other moment is when you and Dana White go back and forth. I love that. That is the best for me as like a fan of the sport, to see somebody challenging Dana White, face to face, and not at the press conference. When you think of those moments, is there any other moments that you really enjoyed about covering the sport live?
Well, I'll correct you on the first part. Israel reacted to the knockout. I didn't see what happened. I had a camera in front of me. So I was more reacting to what happened with him. Why? Like, imagine you're interviewing somebody and you're standing next to them, and then the next moment they're on the floor and you have no idea why. That's why I looked so out of sorts when that happened, because I had no idea what happened. I couldn't see the screen. And he was kind of, when I'm doing an interview with somebody, my total focus is on the subject. I don't expect his total focus to be on me. So his focus was he was half in the interview and half out of the interview, because he wanted to see what was what was happening in that fight. I think he actually was doing me a favor, because he wanted to go back to his seat to watch that fight, and instead he was asked if he would do an interview with me and said yes. He didn't have to. So for him to only give me half of his attention, that's more than the zero attention that he would have given me if he was in a seat. So I was happy to take that. But a lot of people were like, why did you look so frazzled? Why did you not react to the craziest knockout ever? And the truth is, I just didn't see it. And then with Dana, I always say that in terms of interviews, there's nothing that I enjoy more than interviewing Dana White. There's nothing I find more challenging. There's nothing that I find more exciting than getting to interview him. It's the thing that I love the most about this job is being able to discuss things with him. And I think there are days where he likes me and there are days where he doesn't like me, and that's fine. That's the nature of the beast. But my job isn't to try to get him to like me. My job is to get good content from our interviews, and for him to answer questions that I'd like to know the answers to. I find that a lot of people ask Dana questions where the answer is kind of obvious. I try to do the opposite of that. I try to ask him questions where I'm going to get an answer out of him that he's not going to give to somebody else. Because you hear interviews with Dana, and he gives a lot of the same answers. And I think that, I understand that. If you're doing so many interviews and you want to get a message out there, you do want to continue to reiterate that and repeat that. But my goal is to not have that during our interviews. I really want him to open up and talk about things that we haven't heard him talk about before, or give answers to questions that I can just kind of phrase differently to get a different answer from him. But there's nothing I love more than talking to him.
Yeah, I think that is what attracted me to your work the most, is that those interviews. I was like, oh man, he's doing an incredible job with Dana White, because pretty much he's one of the hardest guys to interview. And like you said, he does so many. So man, like, much respect to you, man. I hope the borders open up, and then you could just go back to doing more interviews with Dana White and more live shows, man. I'm looking forward to those. Now let's just move on to the weekend. This weekend there's a card coming up, UFC 255. Man, there's a big fights, right? It's like the flyweight weekend, and let's get into the first one. Is Figueiredo and Alex Perez. Now, with this fight, what do you see, Aaron, as Perez's path to victory in here? It almost seems like Figueiredo has everything covered, all his bases covered.
I think he has many paths to victory. I think that he's a really underrated fighter. He's really good at everywhere. That's what I kind of love about this flyweight division is you don't see any one-dimensional fighters. People are really, really good everywhere. But I think he's got multiple paths to victory. I think he could outwork him over the course of 5 rounds. I think he could knock him out. I think he could submit him. I think that he's capable of doing any of those things against Figueiredo. Figueiredo is not a guy that has been unstoppable in the past. He's a guy that every now and then he doesn't show up for a fight. He doesn't look his best. If he shows up like that, Perez is going to beat him. And I just think that people are overlooking Perez and are anointing Figueiredo as like this next great champion when really we don't know. We haven't seen much from him as of late. I mean, the thing that I think helped him a lot is he left Team Alpha Male, and for whatever reason, he just kind of was rejuvenated as a fighter. I don't know if they were trying to get him to not be himself, because when he's himself, he's dangerous. He's one of the most lethal fighters that we've ever seen in the flyweight division. He's got crazy power. Think about John Lineker if he was able to continuously make weight at 125. That's like what Figueiredo is, except Figueiredo's also got a lot of submissions in his arsenal. I think that the line for this fight is a little bit high. I don't think that he should be a 3-1 favorite. I think that Perez's one loss in his career is against Joe Benavidez. But one thing that he has talked to me about is he feels that result was a direct impact of them having an accidental clashing of heads. And he feels like that really changed the course of that fight because he was really out of sorts as a result of that. It really rocked him. And the same thing kind of happened to Joe when he faced Figueiredo the first time. And that can happen in a fight. And I'm not saying that had that not happened, that Perez would have beaten Benavidez, because Benavidez is an awesome fighter. Benavidez could have easily won that fight regardless of what happened, or regardless of a clashing of heads, rather. But, you can give the guy the benefit of the doubt and say, well, something weird happened and that's why he lost that fight. And other than that, he's looked really great in the octagon. Like, he's beaten. I didn't think he was going to beat Formija in that dominant of a manner. I think that he's a really great fighter and that he's being a little bit overlooked in this spot.
I agree with you in that aspect. Like, his last fight showed a lot. Perez's last fight against Formiga, of his mental approach to fighting and sticking to a game plan and just stopping somebody in a way that nobody expected him to do. You know what I mean? Like, with the leg kicks, it was like, you don't see that really in the flyweight division, right? You don't see guys with that like deadly of power in their legs? Do you remember any guy that has finished somebody in the flyweight division with leg kicks?
No, I mean, I don't think that there's that big of a sample size, but it's rare that you see people finish people with leg kicks in any division. So the flyweight division, I mean, in the UFC, there haven't even been that many fights over the course of a year. So nothing comes to mind.
Yeah, it's just it's an interesting matchup because you have seen this progression of Perez, and he's been consistent. And like you said, Figueiredo, he's inconsistent, but when he is on, he's on. Like he's deadly, like deadly power, deadly submission skills. And that's what makes this interesting. And Figueiredo, like his weight is always going to be an issue. But I saw that he was 135 like 2-3 days out, which is the lowest he's has ever been. So most likely there won't be no issues with the weight, right?
No, we've never seen a champion miss weight, right? Like we've never seen a champion lose the belt on the scale. So
Yeah.
hopefully he's not the first. I'll be watching the weigh-ins with bated breath and hoping that everything goes well.
Yeah, and plus they have Moreno and Royval.
That's true.
They're waiting in the wings if they need to step up. It also goes back to like Perez, when who was the original opponent for Figueiredo? Oh, it was Garbrandt, right? Garbrandt. And when Garbrandt pulled out and they had the choice, right, of Moreno and Perez, were you surprised by the choice of them picking Perez?
No, I spoke to Jason House, who represents both Perez and Moreno and Brandon Royval. And I basically said, that was a coin flip. Like, I think you can make a case for either Perez or Moreno in that case. I think Moreno is probably the more exciting fight on paper, but I think you could have chosen either of them. And, Jason talked to me about like the kind of the elation of getting to tell Alec Perez that he was next in line that he was going to get the title shot. And then immediately after having to call Moreno and tell him the bad news that he wasn't getting the title shot, and that as the manager for both of them, it was very difficult for him to do that. Like he had to like celebrate one of his fighters getting the opportunity and then kind of mourn the other fighter not getting that opportunity. It puts him in a really tough spot, but it was interesting to talk to him about that because you got a really interesting perspective from someone in that role. And it's interesting. Jason House has 90 fighters on the UFC roster, or close to 90 fighters on the UFC roster. Accounts for close to 15% of the UFC's roster. And this is only his second fighter to fight for a title in the UFC. The other one is Soto, who got the call on like 24 hours notice. So now he's got somebody who's got a full camp going into this one and could be his first champion. So it's a really big week for him when you look at that fight. And of course, Royval versus Moreno, those are two of his clients as well, so it was an interesting time to talk to him because you get kind of that insight from him on having to have two of your guys go against each other. Originally, two of your guys go against each other. One of them gets the title shot, one of them doesn't. I just thought that he could provide some unique perspective this week.
Yeah, it's a big headache for him, but at the same time, it's great for his company, and his company's doing great, man. Like, it's incredible what they have done in the past couple of years of growing their roster and putting people and fighters into the UFC. Also Perez, he's, I was watching the countdown and they were talking about how he's the first Contender Series alum to be fighting for the UFC title. And do you think that has a smart part of why they chose him over Moreno?
No, I don't think so. I think it just happens to be a product of it being kind of a thin division. And that's why he ended up being the first. I don't think he even got picked at Contender Series, did he? Oh, no, he did get picked on the actual show. I was talking to Jason about that earlier and got confused. But I don't think that that's the reason why. I think that they just looked at Perez and they thought that he had a better UFC record, which he does. He's got a better, in terms of win percentage, better UFC record. Maybe that's why they decided. I don't know what made them come to that decision. But again, I think it's a coin flip. I think you could make a case for either of those guys.
Yeah. Also, if Perez can go in there and win this title, man, it validates the Contender Series, right? It shows you that the Contender Series can produce some great talent, and we know it can. There's guys that come from the Contender Series. One of the biggest names would be Jeff Neal. Like, I think he's probably going to end up becoming a champion eventually or fighting for the title. What are your thoughts on the Contender Series? Do you feel like it has been watered down a little bit the last season, or do you feel like it's better than ever?
I love it. I think it's such a great way for them to recruit talent because you're basically putting people, you're basically putting them in the deep end. You're throwing them right in the deep end and seeing who sinks and who swims. And I just think I love everything about it. I love the format. I love the concept behind it. Obviously, this season was difficult for them to do with COVID-19. A lot of the fighters were dropping off of the cards during fight week, and they had to find all these different replacements. The one guy was a middleweight yesterday, Nick Maximov, and ended up having to fight a 265-pound heavyweight because it was the only opportunity that was available for him. So kind of a weird season in that regard, but I think we've seen some really great talent come out of this season. I think Adrian Yanez has the potential to be a top 5 guy, possible title challenger in the UFC. He's really good. Ignacio Bahamondes looks like a really interesting fighter with great striking acumen, who I think can be very marketable for them. I just think there have been a lot of fighters from this season that have looked great, and in every season, really, you see a lot of different people rise to the occasion, and I think that because people have watched their episode of Contender Series, you see their backstory, you see them do an interview afterwards. Like it's all about them. It focuses in on the athletes, and it tells great stories. And I think that is really what helps build these people and gets you invested in them. And I would not be shocked if 40 to 50% of the current UFC roster is made up, maybe not 50%, because I guess there's 700 people on it. But if you look at how many people have been picked up on Contender Series, that was the 4th season, plus you had the Brazil season. Like, you're talking probably 50, 60 people on the roster, maybe even more, because they've also gotten people that didn't get a contract or that lost on the show that have gotten contracts. So it's probably like, close to 100 fighters on the active UFC roster that are from that show. And they've used it as a recruiting tool. And I think it's another interesting thing about it is, the NBA draft's on right now. The UFC doesn't really have anything like that, where you're talking about prospects and recruiting and things like that. And the Contender Series kind of gives them that. They give them that kind of like regional to pro avenue that you can follow, and you can learn about these fighters. And Sean Bitter and a lot of those folks that do work for when it comes to scouting prospects. I love reading their stuff because it's great to read about these up and coming talents and see where they end up.
Yeah, definitely. I look at it like as kind of like the NFL combine in a way. Like there's college guys entering to the NFL. They have to go through the combine, and the Contender Series is almost similar to that, just a more, hectic environment. And it is the best prep, I think. You have to fight in front of the bosses, and you have to perform under that pressure. And it's great, man. And when they do get signed and they come back, they're going back into that same venue. So they're comfortable. They don't get the jitters, man. I don't feel like there's many guys after they fight in the Contender Series, they get those octagon jitters. So it's great. Now, before we move on to the women's flyweight championship fight, I wanted to get into this question. Nick, could you put it on the screen? Cole Shelton put up. I think it's a good question.
Thank you, Cole, for your question.
Shout out to Cole. Cole will be on the show in 2 weeks. So remember, don't forget,
Sounds
Cole will be on the show.
That's why he's commenting.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Cole. What's a realistic guess of pay-per-view buys for UFC 255? The embeddeds have done 250K, 190, 98K. And my casual friends who only watch pay-per-views did not realize it was a pay-per-view week.
That's a tough question, right?
That's a question for me?
Yeah, for all of us.
Well, I was looking at those embedded numbers also, and the embedded numbers are very low for this one. Typically, the first episode on what day is it, Wednesday, you'll see where it's kind of trending, and sometimes they'll have 700K views, 800K views. There's just not a lot of juice behind this pay-per-view. I think this is kind of one of the ones for the hardcores. I think the matchups are really good, but I don't think that there's a whole lot of household intrigue, if that makes sense, casual intrigue for this particular pay-per-view. And you know what? Dana White always says this. If you don't like it, don't buy it. If you don't want to buy it, don't buy it. And people can make their own decision. I think these are very high-level fights. I think there are 2 divisions that have not gotten enough love. It's the men's and women's flyweight division. I think the women's flyweight division is more intriguing than ever. Quite frankly, it was boring for a long time. But now that you've got Cynthia Calvillo in the mix, you got Andrade in the mix, you've got some up-and-comers. Like I know Macy Barber stumbled in her last fight, but she's coming up. We're seeing a lot of these up-and-coming new fighters that have populated this division. And I think that having the flyweight division rejuvenated with Davis and Figueiredo the champion, like it's a great card from that standpoint. But I don't think it's a card that necessarily appeals to the people that Cole's talking about, his casual friends.
Yeah, and I'm not a real big predicting pay-per-view buys type of person.
The numbers
like,
they're confusing, right? Like we don't have. When Meltzer was putting out pay-per-view numbers, he had an inside source that worked. I guess I don't know if it was for the pay-per-view companies or for the satellite companies. I don't know what his source was, but the only people that have that those numbers are like ESPN Plus. They have it under lock and key. They don't need to share it. We're seeing some people share pay-per-view numbers every now and then, like Mike Coppinger has shared them. We've seen, I'm trying to think of who else is, like John Orand has shared them from Sports Business Journal. Those are when they have good numbers. When they don't have good numbers, you're not going to see the numbers come out. At least I don't think. I don't know why anybody would, if the source of those numbers is the UFC or ESPN, and I think it probably would be, I don't think that we're going to see low numbers come out.
Yeah, no one's leaking bad news, right? Or
Right.
not bad news, but low numbers. I don't think that's gonna happen. But yeah, realistically, I don't think. Man, if I was gonna make a guess, and I don't like to make guesses on pay-per-views, I don't really understand the obsession with pay-per-view numbers. To be honest with you, like people wanting to know, like especially fans, like what do you think are the pay-per-view numbers for this one? It's like you're a fan, who cares? If you love the product, watch it. If you don't buy the pay-per-view, right? But if I was going to guess. I don't know, man. I don't even think this makes over 250,000. Do you?
No, I don't think so. But again, like you said, I think that those numbers are, people try to use them as a barometer of, oh, this is a good card, this isn't a good card. I'm in the same camp as you. It's like, if there's an event on Saturday, that's where I want to be, is watching that event. Like, I don't know how many other people in this space get as excited about the Saturdays as I do. Like the whole week, as it gets closer and closer to Saturday, I get more and more excited about getting to see how everything unfolds.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people get really drawn into just talking about the narratives and what's next and, oh, what happened and all that. And that stuff is fine. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of stuff. But I think that ultimately a lot of it is just jibber jabber, if that makes sense. Like it's none of it really, that to quote Mr. T, by the way, the older audience will get the jibber jabber reference, but a lot of it doesn't really, it doesn't resonate with me. Like I want to learn more about these athletes and what makes them tick as people. I think that that's a more interesting angle to take. And that's something I've really been working on, again, during this kind of pandemic phase, is trying to change what I focus on in interviews, because I feel like a lot of people focus too much on the obvious, and that the fighters are used to getting these questions. They don't give the honest answers. They give bottled up, packaged answers, and I'm not super interested in that. And I want people to listen to my interview to learn something and not hear the same kind of stuff and the same kind of questions. And I will ask those questions from time to time if I'm actually curious, if I have a genuine curiosity about what the answer is. Like I asked Chukagi, and if the shot that she took from Andrade in the last fight was the most painful shot she's ever taken in a fight. Because I'm interested. I want to know that, because taking a liver shot looks horrible. Like it's having your entire body and system shut down can't feel good. And I want to know how she felt in that moment. That's it. But I don't want to, saying, oh, how badly do you need to rebound off a loss? Well, let's do a little bit of math here. She was the number one contender and lost. And if she loses again, she goes further down the rankings. And if she wins again, she goes further up the rankings. So there's your answer. That's how badly she needs to win, is if she would like to stay relevant in the division, if she would like to remain in contention, she needs a win. And with a loss, she will be further from contention. Have you learned anything new from me giving you this remarkable information? Because you don't need to ask her that. You can ask me that. Ask me if Caitlin Jukagian's in a must-win situation if she wants to remain in title contention right now. The answer is like, it's an answer you do not need, because you know it. And those are the kind of questions I'm really trying to avoid. If I ask those questions, a lot of the time it's to buy myself time so I can think of a better question next time. Like that's why I will ask obvious questions in those situations where if I feel like there's more to get to and I've forgotten something that I want to get to, it buys me time to think about that. But ultimately, I'm not personally a big fan of those questions, because I feel like everybody asks them. I feel like you're not learning anything, and there's nothing to be gained from that information.
That's the quandary of being an interviewer, right? Is that you want to ask the questions that like brings out the headlines, but also at the same time you want to ask questions that no one else is asking. And right now, a lot of people that are doing interviews, they're asking, like you said, really obvious things, and of course you have to ask some of those obvious questions, but I think you need to sprinkle in some extra, right? And that's the dilemma of someone like myself and like yourself and Nick, is that we have to come up with these things, that's come up with the questions. Because when you interview a guy or a fighter or a woman, and they've done like 10 interviews, and you look at those interviews and you're like, oh man, they almost asked every single question possible, right? So it's like you get this challenge to bring up another question. And that's what I have right now. Is like tomorrow I have to interview Cynthia Calvillo, right? And leading up to this fight, she's probably done I don't know how many interviews, right? So I'm gonna watch all the. Have you done an interview with her?
Yeah, it's on the TSN MMA show. If you feel free to listen to it.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it.
But you'll hear that there's some variance from like where a lot of people go, because again, like you said, you feel like every question's already been asked and that they're just going to give you the same answer. And I really try to avoid that, but I kind of have the luxury to do that. I shouldn't, I'm not trying to demean anybody that does do that, because, a lot of people are reliant on traffic and web traffic and on engagement and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not really. Like, my bosses have never pressured me to put out an article or an interview that's going to do clicks. Not once in my entire time covering the sport. They have never said, "Oh, this article needs to get this many views. We're struggling this month." Or I'm lucky in that regard because I work for a major network that covers all different sports, right? Like, and I think that because of that, I am afforded the ability to improve my interviewing skills by trying to take a little bit more of a psychological approach to it, a more of a cerebral approach to it. Because I don't have that pressure on me. So if somebody does have that pressure on them, I kind of understand where they're coming from. It's just not for me. And I'm kind of, again, I kind of have the privilege to be able to not have to worry about that.
Yeah, without that pressure, like you said, you can explore more aspects and avenues of questioning, and it almost, more, I guess you're able to find the gems, when you do that, like something that you never expected to come out of an avenue that you explore, and that's what's good about the freedom. But then, like you said, there's the other side where you have to get the clicks, you have to, you have to get the views, like it's a balance, man. Some of these people, like even myself, it's like sometimes I look back and think like, man, I gotta switch these questions up. I can't ask the same question this other person asked, but then at the same time, that question is going to get you the clicks and it's going to get you the headline. So it's a never-ending battle, man. Until I get into your position, Aaron, then I could be like, all right, now I could explore different avenues.
Well, it's kind of a transformative phase for me because I want people to be interested in my interviews for that reason now. Like, if they want to get a little bit more in depth and a little bit more thoughtful in the approach to an interview, and then I want them to come to me for that. And that's kind of why I've changed it up a little bit, and why I've I started to get tired of doing the same old thing, and I felt like I didn't gain anything from the interview. I've always had a very simple mantra when it comes to interviewing. I want to ask the questions that I want the answers to. It's like, it's the most simple thing on the planet. But it's like, if I already know the answer to something, or I can guess what the answer is going to be, it doesn't engage me. It doesn't do anything for me. So I want to ask the questions that I don't know the answers to. It seems simple, but that's the mantra that I go by for all of my interviews.
Definitely. Now let's get into the Shevchenko Maia matchup. Everybody believes, or a lot of people believe, Shevchenko is pretty much unbeatable, right, in this division. And she has shown that she maybe is. I don't know for sure. Nobody's unbeatable, though. We've seen that, many times in the past where guys or girls look like they're not going to lose, but then they get upset. The biggest example is what? Ronda Rousey versus Holly Holm. So do you feel like we could see this happening in this fight coming up? Will we see a Ronda Rousey Holly Holm situation here?
I think she would be the biggest favorite in UFC history if she wins this fight. I think, or the biggest underdog rather, to win a fight if Jennifer Maia pulls off the upset. I don't think we will, but I do think that Jennifer Maia is a really good fighter that will pose challenges for Shevchenko. I don't think that this is going to be a walk in the park for Valentina Shevchenko. It might be, but Maia's tough. She comes from a good camp. She's good everywhere, and I think that as long as her weight's on point and her process is on point, I think that she can pose a threat to Shevchenko. I think that the line for this fight is a little bit wide. I think that if you do like Shevchenko, you got to look at props and things like that, because betting somebody at -400, you're not going to make much anyways off of that. But and it's very risky. Your heart's going to be beating like maniacally during that fight. But I do think that Maia is a very good fighter that can pose some challenges to Shevchenko. I would not write her off going into this fight.
Yeah, Maia, she is like a tank of a woman, right? For that 125-pound division. She moves forward. She's willing to trade. She's willing to get hit to land. And I feel like this is going to be probably the toughest fighter to put away that Shevchenko is facing, and I'm excited to see this. I feel like a lot of people expect this to be one-sided. I don't think it will be. I want to see if Maia can drag Shevchenko to the ground, even though we've seen Shevchenko go to the ground and do very well against good grapplers. We saw her submit what was her name? Yeah, Pena. So, she can throw up some submissions off her back, but I feel like Maia poses different pressures in the ground game and a little bit more diverse. So, this Shevchenko fight, it's interesting to me, like you said earlier about like you get pumped up for shows. And the reason why I get pumped up for shows is, I know about the narrative and I'm interested about it, but I'm always interested in the what is it? The unpredictability of fights. That's what interests me the most, because you've seen the Joaquin Buckley finishes and those types of things. That's what interests me about the UFC the most, is like, what can I see? And that's why I want to watch it live. Even though it's on early in the morning here, I try to wake up as early as I can to catch every fight, and sometimes I don't, but I usually catch every event over here. And man, this year we've had some shocking moments, and man, I just want to see more shocking moments. Do you like that? Of course you like that aspect, Aaron, right?
Hard not to. I mean, that's the kind of cool thing about the UFC, is like, you can have the greatest highlight ever, like number one on SportsCenter any given weekend. Like this past weekend, we saw Chaos Williams get that knockout over Abdul Razak Al Hassan. It was the number one SportsCenter highlight. Like, that can happen any week. And that's why when people say, "Oh, this card sucks," it's it's not deep, and there's no intrigue. I'm watching. So like, you can do you can go and spend your Saturday night however you want. And I know that this is my job to cover the sport, so I'm not trying to have some sort of superiority over you, but I'm watching. And if I wasn't doing this job, before I was doing this job, I was watching every single week. And it drove my wife crazy, because at least now I'm getting paid to do it. But back then I was just watching every single week. And I loved it. And I still carry that same passion for it every single weekend. And it bothers me when people say, "Oh, this is not a good card," because you're still getting high-level competitors competing that are, you're not seeing squash fights every week. You're not seeing, like Shevchenko, I guess, this weekend. But I mean, Maia earned this title shot, right? Like, it's not like this isn't a fight where they're trying to pad Shevchenko's record. But you don't often see fights the minus 800 favorites against big underdogs, like, consistently, like in boxing. Like, in boxing, you'll see people that are minus 25,000 in a boxing match. Like, why watch it? Like, why? Like, I mean, you'll get the occasional upset, I'm sure, but like the UFC just doesn't book fights like that. And that's what I love about it, is because you're getting high quality competition every single week. You have the potential to see great highlights every single week. That's what I love about this sport, right? So, like you said, I'm intrigued to see how Maia does, because I think Maia's really good on the feet. I think Maia's good on the ground, well-rounded fighters. I think the same of Perez. Like, I think Perez can cause problems for Figueiredo everywhere, right? So let's see how it plays out. Let's see how it unfolds. And, if we get an upset, that's great. And if we don't get an upset, that's great, because I think the fights are going to be good, regardless of what the outcome is.
Now, with a guy that has blown up on the scene in the UFC and pretty much worldwide in MMA is Khamzat Chimaev. And I know you're very passionate about this topic of him actually being ranked, right? Before he was ranked, you were talking about him being ranked, right? And I wanted to get into this because he's actually ranked, I believe, number 15 now in the welterweight division, and he's only had one win at welterweight against Reese McKee, which is a fighter that debuted when he fought him, right? Now, if you're going to argue for him to be 15, like, what would be your argument, Aaron?
Well, I think that it's a matter of people looking at who people are beating rather than how they're winning fights. Mm-hmm. And I think that Chimaev, while he is only 1-0 against a newcomer in the welterweight division, you see his body of work from the Meerschaert fight to the fight against John Phillips, and just how much he is dominating these fighters. These are UFC fighters. Like, this is not regional scene, can crushing fights. These are fighters that have earned their way to the UFC. Reese McKee looked good this past weekend. I know he lost to Morono, but he looked good. Like, he belongs in the UFC. John Phillips has gotten a win in the UFC. Meerschaert has the most submissions in middleweight history. Like, these are not jokers that are being thrown to him where he's supposed to look great. He looked great because he's great. So when people will say, "Oh, well, he hasn't beaten so-and-so, and who are you going to pull out of the rankings?" Well, if you looked at the bottom 3 or 4 people that were ranked at 170 pounds, like, their resumes at welterweight were not good, and they had been on losing streaks. Like, they have great, they have they've done a lot of great things in their career for sure. But I asked an odds maker if how many people Khamzat would be favored against in the welterweight division, and basically it was like everybody short of Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman. And you're looking at it right now because he's a minus 180 favorite over Leon Edwards, the number 3 ranked guy in the division, who's on an 8-fight winning streak, and he's beaten the likes of like Rafael dos Anjos. He's beaten great fighters, and that's how highly they think of Chimaev, and that's how highly the public thinks of Chimaev. Because if the public didn't feel that way, because the line was open at minus 170 for Edwards, the public obviously feels like this guy is good enough that they've made the line go completely in the other direction. And the reason for that is because of what we've seen. We know what we see. So let's see how he does against Edwards. But from what I have seen, this guy looks like he's going to be a dominant fighter and potential champion in the UFC. And yeah, I mean, look at Chaos Williams. He's gotten 2 great first-round finishes against Morono and against Al Hassan, and maybe he's not getting enough credit for it. But I mean, what we saw from Chimaev was the drawn-out maulings where you see a round and a half of him going against, I think it was McKee finished in the second round. And he's not absorbing any punches. So I think that's why when you look at what Chimaev has done, you can see the tools that this guy has that are going to make him great. And now we're going to see in December if he is great, because if he beats Leon Edwards, now he's in the top 3 of the welterweight division. And I will hate to say that I told you so. And if he gets blown out by Edwards, feel free to send me a tweet and say, Aaron, you were way off on this. And maybe I am. But from what I've seen from this guy, I think that he has all the tools to be a superstar in the sport.
I agree with you that he has all the tools to be a superstar in the sport. And Nick, could we get the rankings up there, like the UFC rankings, so we could check out like who's actually in the welterweight rankings and middleweight rankings? His I'm not a hype train guy. You know what I mean? Like I've never been a hype train guy, and people are like, why are you never on hype trains? I feel like you need to prove yourself.
Oh, we know better. We know better. We've seen hype trains get derailed.
Exactly, right? So, but even in other sports too.
Yair Rodriguez was a hype train, and he got derailed by Frankie Edgar, but he's bounced right back.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so we do need to be. So let me ask you this. When was the last time we've seen somebody do what Khamzat has done, where you come into the UFC, you win 3 fights in a row in that kind of fashion, where you outstrike your opponent, was 94-3 or whatever it is, fail in the UFC, or end up not living up to the hype? Like, come up with some scenarios for me and come up with some answers for me, because nobody seems to have them.
Nobody does. And you make a strong argument, but to me, I don't feel like he should be ranked in the welterweight division. He's only had 1 fight, and it's against Rhys McKee. And Rhys McKee, no disrespect to him, but he's 0-2 in the UFC. He's, he hasn't really done anything in the UFC. And to me, if Khamzat would have beat somebody that was in the rankings, then I would say like, okay, at welterweight, you could put him in there in between 10 and 15, but he hasn't beat anybody yet. I feel like he could be ranked in the middleweight division. That would be a better argument, right? At 15, because he did beat Meerschaert. And then, like you said, the way he dominated those fights, and everybody thought Meerschaert would be the biggest test, and he just went in there and 1-punch KO'd him like it was nothing, right? So I was really impressed by that, and I felt like, okay, you could put him at middleweight. You could probably rank him there. I feel like he's done enough, but at welterweight, it's hard for me to argue for that. You know what I mean? And in a way, it's like, I do not agree with him being at 15, but he does have a big fight and coming up against the number 3 guy, Leon Edwards. And like you said earlier, he's favored going into that fight. And man, it's pretty crazy. I feel like there's going to be a lot of money on Leon Edwards coming in. Do you feel like that line's going to change eventually?
Maybe closer to fight day, but I mean, it changed from Edwards being minus 170 to now Khamzat being minus 180, right? So it's swung in the other direction. And that's the early money, and the early money is often an indication of what the perception is. But you showed that those rankings, like number 14 above Khamzat is Robbie Lawler. If he was going to face Robbie Lawler, he'd be like a 7-1 favorite, 6 or 7-1 favorite, in my opinion, over the current version of Robbie Lawler that we've seen lately. So if that's the case, why? Like, I know he has to get that win in order to get to that ranking, but if people believe he's that much better than ranked fighters, he should be ranked, in my opinion. Again, it's just based on, I want to see what people can do. And I know that he hasn't done it against the highest level of competition, but by him mauling people like that, like the other thing that I proved, that has been undeniably proved, was when I said this guy needs a number beside his name or nobody's going to face him. They had to take Leon Edwards' ranking away from him to get him to agree to face Khamzat Chimaev. Nobody was agreeing to fight this guy. They had to penalize somebody for not taking the fight with Khamzat Chimaev. They were going to pull Leon Edwards right out of the rankings. And then suddenly, he's 3 again, ranked number 3 again. Suddenly, he accepts the fight and he's right back in there, number 3. And
but you gotta think, like, there was Neil Magny, he was out there saying he would fight Khamzat. There was Ian Heinrich, he was out there expressing that he would fight Khamzat. Do you think that they're just blowing smoke, or do you feel like these guys really didn't? They don't really want to fight him, you know what I mean? Because both Neil and Ian, they're ranked. I've talked to Ian about it extensively.
Yeah, I think that they would have fought him for sure. But I do think that the UFC wants to put him in a main event. And when you put him in a main event, you want to get the biggest name possible against him. I think that putting him against Edwards, like, that's way more intriguing than either of those other options. I was on that the show that MMA Fighting does, Inside the Links, Behind the Links,
Between the Links,
Between the Links, that they do on Monday. And they asked who I thought Khamzat should fight next. It was the last answer of the show, and I lost because of my answer. My answer was Leon Edwards. I said, throw him into the deep end, have him fight Leon Edwards. They laughed at me. And then, like, within the week, he was booked against Leon Edwards. So I just think that we need to see how good this guy is. And I think that that's the way you see how good this guy is. You put him up against a guy like a Leon Edwards, because if he beats Leon Edwards, there's not going to be a single person that says this guy is not worthy of being a top 5 welterweight.
If he beats Leon Edwards, I will believe all the hype.
Everybody will.
Everybody will.
But that's why you need to book that fight.
Yeah. I can see that.
They want people to see what this guy's about.
Well, Ian was talking about the Khamzat fight before he was scheduled to fight Kelvin Gastelum. And, let's talk about Ian a little bit. Like, Ian has had his last couple of fights canceled due to COVID. And then now he's getting, like, the biggest opportunity
I know, right?
of his career. That trips me out, right? Like, how this COVID has allowed a lot of these guys to get the best fights, and it's just fast tracking them. Look at Brendan Royval, him especially.
But that's the one guy people aren't talking about this year when they're talking about the newcomers, like the people that had a great 2020. Like, Royval is going to be the number 1 contender for the flyweight title, at least from a meritocracy standpoint, if he ends up winning against Brandon Moreno. And that's in the span of 6 months. Like, when did this guy debut in the UFC? And he looked spectacular in his fights. Like, Royval is one of those guys that people need to talk about for, the best newcomer on the scene for 2020 alongside Khamzat. I mean, if Khamzat ends up being Leon Edwards, it's a slam dunk. But Brandon Royval is another guy that needs to be in the conversation.
I think, like, when they talk about fighters of the year, this year, you can't even pick a champion. You got to pick. There's so many guys that deserve that moniker, like that title. It's like, you got Holland. If Holland goes in there and beats Hermanson, and Hermanson's sitting at number 4, another guy that I think he's 4-0 this year and has taken late notice fights and an incredible run. And if he finished this year with a win over a top ranked guy, where do you put him, man? Like, you could put him against, like, Paulo Costa, man. Like, it's that's a meritocracy right there. Like, the way that he's done it. And Brandon Royval, I've been talking about him the whole time, about him, how he's neck and neck with Khamzat. Like, if he wins this fight against Moreno, it sets him up for an early title shot.
You know who I think is the fighter of the year is this year? I think it is a champion. I think it's Jan Blachowicz. Like, I think if you look at what Blachowicz has done this year, I don't know when he beat Corey Anderson. I don't know if you have that information in front of you. But the win over Reyes this year to become the champion, I think he must have beaten Corey Anderson this year. Like, that's an incredible year for him. I know that John Jones didn't relinquish the title, but vacated the title and all that. And, like, he's kind of the champion. Him becoming a champion is a product of that. But I think that Blachowicz has to be the fighter of the year, from being a guy that I think a lot of people consider to be kind of a middling light heavyweight to getting all the way to a title fight and winning the title. I think you have to consider him that. Yeah, February of this year against Corey Anderson. So this year he's beaten Corey Anderson and he beat Reyes to become the champion. Like, that's a really good year for somebody who I don't think anybody would have expected to become a champion in the UFC.
Yeah, also Glover Teixeira too.
He had a great year too, for sure.
Yeah. There's so many guys that have, like, I was talking to Brandon Royval leading up to this fight this weekend, and he was telling me, like, there's this quarantine division, and that's like something separate from everybody else, which is Khamzat's part of it and Brandon's part of it. And yeah, man, it puts a smile on my face to see some of these guys come in on short notice or probably get a contract a little bit too early, but just, perform and excel and take these moments and make the best of them. And look at look at these guys. They're getting bonuses. Their net worth has grown like exponentially. Like they're like hundreds of $1,000s richer than they were like at the beginning of 2020. And I'm happy for all of them, man. I'm happy for Khamzat, Brandon, Holland. They're all getting opportunities, and it's fun to watch. Yeah. Do we have any other questions, Nick, down there?
Yeah, it's a couple. I think one for Aaron here from our buddy Leon Jennings, Asian Persuasion MMA, asking you, Aaron, if you follow One Championship at all. Do you have any thoughts on their product? He's also saying he thinks you're the best in the game at what you do.
Well, thank you. I don't watch One Championship as often as I should. It's on early in the morning here. I like a lot of the things that they do, but I feel like they do it under kind of like this shroud of secrecy. Like, has anybody seen one of their weigh-ins? And like, has anybody seen that? Like, their actual numbers of how they're monitoring the weight? Like, they've got all these great ideas, but you don't like. I don't know where they come from. And then there's the ratings and how many viewers they have. Like, I've emailed Nielsen to say like, hey, can you confirm this? And like, they never answer. They never respond. Like, because the numbers are always like this. It's like, oh, Nielsen says that we did like whatever 20 million people watched this event. And it's like, okay, well, that's great, but like, I can't get anybody to confirm it. What they did, I thought the one thing that they did with the One World event, it was called the One World event. It was this global thing that like hundreds of networks worldwide were showing. They like made commercials with like One Championship fighters in it and like used the name One in the advertising as if like they were the ones putting the event on, but they were like just one of the many like rights holders of this particular event. Like, that kind of was weird to me too. And then I emailed the One charity and they never got back to me either. So I'd like to believe that what they're doing, like that their heart's in the right place, because the weight cutting thing they're doing is brilliant. It's great. And I think that it is for the health and safety of the fighters, and that's great. And them working with the charity is awesome. Like, I'm not gonna. And if they're doing great in Asia and their ratings are great, that's great for MMA in Asia. I'm happy to see that MMA is that important to people in the continent of Asia. Like, I'm hoping that everything that they're saying is true, but I don't know if I buy it. And then he's got his new apprentice show that he's doing. Like, I don't know. It's just a lot of it is I don't know if like just being in North America and being so detached from what One Championship is doing is making me a little bit jaded about what they do. But I don't know. I'm interested to see if all of that stuff is true. And if it is, more power to them. Like, I'm one of the people that believes that having competition for the UFC is good. Like, having global competition for the UFC, regardless of if it's Bellator, if it's One, like, I think it's good. I want to see as many promotions thrive as possible. It's hard to have a good MMA promotion that's successful. So that's why I hope that what One are doing, they've signed a lot of great kickboxers. Like, I'm a big fan of kickboxing, and they've signed some great kickboxers. So I like what they're doing there. I like the mantra that Chatri has. I think that he is somebody who cares deeply about martial arts and wants and cares about the ethos of martial arts and does want to kind of take the trash talking and drama out of martial arts. And I think that is refreshing to see. And I think that resonates more with an audience in Asia. I might be wrong on that, but than a North American audience who seem to thrive on the drama of it all and the narratives and all of that stuff. And that's kind of how we've been programmed as people in North America. But I don't follow One as closely as I'd like to. I think they have a lot of awesome fighters on the roster. And I do hope that they are doing as well as they say they are.
It's funny because they've done a little U-turn, haven't they, on the trash talk a bit, John? Now they're encouraging it a bit more. I've had times where they're saying if a fighter says something interesting, which you could construe as trash talk, I'd get a call from a PR saying, "Oh, can you change that? We don't want to have any trash talk." Now they're willingly putting it out there. But I agree with you, Aaron. I think I love the fights and the fighters in One, but some of the stuff outside leaves me wondering, asking questions about, the One World charity. That was weird. And there are a few questions. But if you look at the fights, I enjoy it, and it's good for me being in Asia. And I'm sure, John, you agree. Yeah, it's good to just have Asian MMA on a big stage like that.
Of course, man. There's got to be someone on this side of the world doing it for us.
I was such a big fan of Dream, so it's great. It is great to see it on this side of the world. And I think that there is a different ethos and a different level of respect for Asian MMA. I think what Ryzen has done, a lot of their events are really fun to watch. Like, I used to stay up. This is before I had kids. I'll preface it by saying that, but I used to stay up and watch Dream. Like, I'd stay up till 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and watch those Dream events. And I used to love them. Like, Dream was so much fun to watch. And, again, the more promotions, the better. And the more opportunities for fighters to make money and to have a platform for their incredible athleticism and technique and everything that they put work into. Again, more power to them all.
I'm glad you're out there emailing people and questioning,
Yeah.
what you're interested in, and we need more people. That shows interest on that side of the world of like what one championship is doing, and I think that's better for everybody. Try to if you have a question, go out there and try to find the answer to these questions. Yeah, when they do weigh-ins, they do broadcast them live, and then the hydration test they do send out PR. What is it? They do send out press releases on that, so we get those.
But nobody ever misses weight. Nobody ever fails these hydration tests.
No, they do. They do.
They do
okay,
miss weight. I don't see it.
There's been a couple. Yeah.
Often?
Not very often.
Yeah. But there is.
I've seen it
then
before.
I feel like they make adjustments and they do catch weight fights and
Yeah.
they I guess they do that. But it's not like a big deal like it would be with the UFC. The UFC, like the weigh-ins are a major. It's almost like an event on itself. You know what I mean? Like separate before the show. So yeah, but they do allow that, and also like we ourselves on this channel, we do a fight companion for every one championship show, and we show the events on the channel, and we commentate separate from the commentators at one championship, and our biggest show got over 400,000 views.
That's great.
So
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Again, I hope that what they say is true, and I need to become more educated on it myself for sure. Like I don't follow it as closely as I should because my mandate for TSN is to cover the UFC. We show the UFC events. We're more invested in the UFC than any other promotion. So I try to stick with that. But there's always times where if I have a question about something or I don't think that something is as it appears, I just want to do a little digging on it. That's just kind of my nature.
Yeah, you're a reporter, you're a journalist, man. You got to do that. I have questions too, and I'm over here, covering the shows and everything. So,
But that's the problem in MMA media. It's like if you dig too deep, you get your access revoked, and I think that's what a lot of people ask the easy questions, and they don't. It's good to see you, Aaron, doing some of that. It is quite rare, I think, and I'm guilty of it myself. Sometimes I know if I dig too deep, I'm gonna get banned from this or that. It's tough.
But again, I think it's I come at it kind of from a position of privilege because of if like I get in trouble with one championship, like it doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
I don't have I don't have much at stake there. But
But if you pissed off the UFC, would you be in trouble?
No, I don't think so. And I've pissed off the UFC many times. But but
is that because you've got a big network though? Like they wouldn't ban you.
Well, maybe,
but if someone with a smaller website might get banned or.
But I genuinely like the people that work in the PR department for the UFC. Like I find they're all straight shooters. They're all very nice people. They're all incredibly friendly. And like I don't want to have an adversarial relationship with anybody, whether it's a manager, whether it's the UFC, whether it's even one championship. Like I'm just trying to do my job, and I hope that people can appreciate that. But I put that first. But relationships mean everything to me, honestly. Like if the UFC have a problem with me and they call me and they talk to me about it, I'm certainly willing to listen to what their standpoint is and explain to them my vantage point. And because of that, because we've got that kind of open line of communications, I feel like I've gotten better at making sure that I have a good line of communication with them, and that if there's something that I'm unclear on, I will reach out to them before I say why is this that way, instead of just wondering about it. Like find out from them and see what they have to say about it. And then if what they give me is not satisfactory, I'll go elsewhere and keep looking for more information. But again, that's my job as a reporter. But I have a really good relationship with the people that work with the UFC, and I really hope to keep it that way because I don't think of them as a lot of people will look at PR people and think of them as the enemy. I don't think of it that way. I think they have to do their job and I have to do my job, and we have an understanding in that regard.
That's all we got.
Two sides, isn't it? You've got to
That's all we have is relationships, man. That's
100%.
Like that's what I live off of basically, is the relationships I build with fighters, managers, with PR teams. If you don't have that, then it's very hard to do your job unless you're just writing opinion pieces all day, right?
Yeah, and those writers have a function as well, and
exactly,
they have to do what they have to do, and I'm sure a lot of them have bad relationships with the promotion, but their role is to write compelling articles, and I get that. Like I don't fault them for that at all. I think a lot of people, I find that a lot of people tend to side with the promotions rather over the fighters, and that when
Yeah.
people write stuff that is against what a promotion is doing, like people like the general public, I mean, like they get their backs up about it and they get very angry. But it's like if somebody's putting in the work and they're providing a compelling argument for something and they've put the work into it and they've gotten quotes, like read it, and if you like it, that's good, or don't like it, at least like appreciate that people are doing that kind of work instead of trying to pick sides and what side of the fence you're on. Like I really did, try really hard not to pick sides. Like I feel like there's always gray in between the black and white, and that I try as hard as possible to stay in the gray if I can. Every now and then I'll tweet something that's like political and people will freak out. And but then I realize it's not the function of my job. I don't need to post political stuff. In fact, the political stuff bores me. I just like I'm exhausted by it. I don't know how people cover politics every day. It's exhausting to see. But I just try to focus on what I do best, and that's going outside of those lines. Sometimes I have to kind of stop myself and be like, listen, people don't care about my opinion on this.
Yeah, man. John pissed off Tan Lee today or last night? I woke up today. I had like 10 messages in this chain on Twitter. He was going back and forth, Tan Lee and Henry Hooft. What did you gave an interview with Martin Nguyen, and Tan thought you were favoring him or something. I don't know. It was so weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I think that's just a normal thing that could happen when you interview two sides. You know what I mean? One is the champion, one was the champion, one is the new champion, and they feel like the questioning is a certain way towards one particular fighter. And what can I do, man? I look back at my questions and I said, and I listened to what I said, and I didn't try to sway one side or to the other. You know what I mean? I try to be very complimentary to every fighter when I'm with them. I don't try to attack them or anything like that. That's not like my job. My job is to kind of get information and get their story out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if
he accused you of like being subjective, or
subjective,
that was a bit unfair. I
What
mean,
can you
you're
do,
always
man?
really nice with every fighter, and you've known Martin
try
for
to be.
years. So of course it's difficult when you're interviewing someone you've known for years who's lost the title.
Yeah,
That's
but the
one of
thing
the
is that
interesting issues I
that's
find in this
also
media game.
when you interview somebody for many years and you get this relationship with them, it's not like I have a relationship outside of that. It's just like we have a relationship of interviews and fighter reporter type.
It's a
deal.
rapport. Yeah,
rapport, and also you could get comfortable with those people, and you could actually ask them the tougher questions, to be honest with you, because you're comfortable with each other. So it is what it is. Like if they felt like I was subjective, I guess I'm not going to argue about it, because there's no point, because we could just go back and forth for days. So I want to move on.
Sometimes it's best to get on the phone with them and say, hey, like here's where I was coming from. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you feel like I didn't do the right thing, and I'll try to do a better job next time and do right by you. I appreciate the work you do. It's as easy as that sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, and that's why I will never come out and say like Valentina is going to smash Jennifer Maia. It's going to be a lopsided fight. I know the work that Jennifer Maia is putting in, and I would never want to diminish that. And I kind of felt bad because yesterday during Contender Series, I was saying that I wouldn't have given DePaula a contract because she didn't finish somebody who I thought was, had a padded record, honestly. Like her opponent was 4-0, and she had no wins over somebody who had a win over somebody. Does that make sense? Like all of her wins were against people that had wins over 0-0 opponents.
Yeah.
And like suddenly she's getting a shot at the UFC and she looks completely outmatched. And DePaula's doing a great job, looking great. But if you can't get a finish over somebody that you're looking like you're that much better than, and the format of the Dana White Contender Series is always like, oh, if you get a finish, you're in. You got to get a good finish. And she didn't get a finish. And I said I wouldn't, based on the parameters of the show, I wouldn't give her a contract. And people were freaking out on me. But like, I am hoping that if somebody that knows DePaula or works with DePaula or is a coach of DePaula, I hope that they and the other side as well, like her opponent. Like I don't want them to think that I am diminishing their hard work to get to where they are. But at the same time, I do have to give opinions on the sport. Like it's part of my job. At least I think it's part of my job. I could just be a simple X's and O's reporters, and I think that there's a lot of people that have, those kind of relationships. That kind of that's the way that they approach it. That's not really the way that I like to approach it. But I'm entitled to having an opinion, and I think that Dana White's the cool thing about the format of that show is at the end somebody gets a contract and somebody doesn't, and it's cool to kind of predict who you think's going to get one.
Well, I think that comes with the territory when you have so many followers and people are are watching you, you know, and whatever you put out there, there's going to be people that disagree and agree. So you just got to take it with a grain of salt and move on, man. You can't get hung up on it. And I think a lot of people, they get hung up on that when they tweet stuff out, and some people don't agree or kind of attack them. It's just, man, it's Twitter. What do you
I know,
expect?
but on the flip side of that, I don't want to second guess myself. Like, I don't want to be like,
Mhm.
oh man, like did I do something bad there? Like, did I make the wrong choice by writing that, or did I insult the fighter? Like, I don't want to do that. So I don't mind if people give me feedback, and it does make me think about things, and maybe I'll do a better job next time if I feel like I had done something that I could have done better.
Yeah, I never second guess myself. If I tweet something and it makes people angry, I'm just like, man, it made people angry, because at the end of the day, whatever you say is gonna make somebody feel a certain way about it, and I just move on. I'm pretty good with letting stuff, you know,
That's
slide.
because you have more
You know,
self-awareness than I do, so I can appreciate it.
yeah, it's just, but you know, like last week I went off on Steve-O, you know, about him being on press row,
I saw
and
that.
yeah, and I, you know, and sometimes I do feel that way about certain things, because there's people that, you know, worked hard to try to get into that position, and just because you're a celebrity, you know, you shouldn't get this, because you could get different access when you're a celebrity. And what, you know, I wanted to ask you about it. You know, what did you think about, you know, somebody sitting at press row that's not actually a member of the press?
I'm on the other side of this argument, unfortunately, John. Like, I
Mhm.
think that the UFC did, you do that kind of thing for publicity. It wasn't a pay-per-view event. It was a small event. It's not like people had spent, you know, a lot of money to go out of pocket and travel to cover an event. This was like a fight night. Steve-O happens to be there. He gets to kind of sit in the arena. It's a different set of circumstances. You know, we're in this era where there's no fans. It's an empty building. It's a more intimate atmosphere. He happens to be there. He asks a funny question. People share it. He gets publicity out of it. The UFC gets publicity out of it. It's a fun thing. I don't get hung up on something like that. I don't think that they stopped other people from asking questions because Steve-O had a question. Like, I think that if anybody else had a question, they could have asked it. So I don't find there to be much harm in it.
All right, well, you know, like, I understand that aspect too of it, but you know, like, that's just, you know, at the spur of the moment, that's how I felt, you know, and I can't, you know, backtrack, but I understand your viewpoint of like trying to get more eyes on it. But like I said before, he could get access that none of us could probably get, you know what I mean, with fighters, and he could probably do it separately, but it is what it is. I'm not gonna like continue arguing about Steve-O, because that's not something that I want to do.
Yeah, but if you're the UFC and like Steve-O's publicist sends you an email and was like, "Hey, Steve-O's doing a fun viral video and wants to interview so and so, and it's gonna be on YouTube," like, they get so much more reach from that than they would from like, you know, a smaller website covering it.
Exactly. That, yeah, no, that's clear. That's clear. This question:
Yeah,
have you ever
Denise
had a
asking,
fight?
yeah, anytime you've ever had to check with a fighter, Aaron, can I ask you this question, or have they told you that? Please don't ask me this.
Yeah, I've had fighters. So I think I can only think of one instance where they've said to me, actually two instances, where they've asked me to not ask a certain thing, and it's not something that I would have wanted to ask anyways. So if a fighter ever said to me, "Don't ask me about this," and I'm like, "Well, my interview is going to be garbage if I don't ask about this." The thing that I will never do is, like, if there's a question that needs to be asked and I'm told I can't ask it, I don't want to look like an idiot for not asking that question. Like, I don't want people to. I will say to them, "I won't ask you this question, but off the top, I'm going to say that you have asked not to be asked this question, because people don't know that you've asked me to not ask you this." So if somebody says to me like, "Hey, I got a DUI 2 weeks ago. Don't ask me about the DUI. It's at the courts," just for example. And in my mind, I'm like, well, everybody knows, everybody's been following this DUI, and you're fighting 2 weeks later. This is a totally fictional scenario, by the way. I don't know if there's been a fighter that's gotten a DUI and fought 2 weeks later. So
Not
don't
on
eat this at
Jones.
all.
No.
I'm making it up. No, John Jones didn't fight 2 weeks after getting a DUI. He was actually stripped of the title, right? It's not an example of anything that's actually ever happened. This is a dramatization, like Unsolved Mysteries. So yeah, if they said like, "Don't ask me about this DUI," I would say, "Okay, I won't ask you about it, but off the top, I'm going to say to you, you got a DUI 2 weeks ago. You don't want to address that, and I understand. Moving on, let's talk about your fight." And if they won't accept that, then I will say to them, like, if I don't ask you about this, and this is the number one news story, I will look like an idiot, and I can't do that. And then it's up to them if they want to pull the plug on it. And usually, if somebody from the PR department comes up to me and says that to me in advance, I'll often say, like, I'm not going to do the interview, and they'll be like, okay, and then they just they won't tell the fighter that. And I think that's probably a better way of handling it, is if in advance somebody comes to you, as opposed to right before an interview, which has happened to me before, where someone right before an interview will say, hey, don't ask me about this.
For myself, I've had, fighter, coach, or whatever, they I set up an interview and then they tell me, I don't want to talk about this, and I tell them, I'm gonna ask you anyways, or either we're just not gonna do the interview, and that's the kind of like the choice, you have to make as the person that's being interviewed, right? So that's the options that they give, is like, if we do this interview, I'm going to ask this question anyways, and if you don't want to answer that question, then I guess we're not going to do the interview. And that's and other times, like the PR or the manager will say, like, this person doesn't want to talk about this, and I'll be like, well, if I have to think, was I going to even talk about that situation with them? And if not, then I say, all right, then let's do the interview. And that's kind of like the situations that I've had in the past. But other than that, there has never been like, big issues with that, to be honest with you. Have you had that, Nick?
I'm not sure I've had it, but sometimes I know they won't want to answer things, so I won't ask them. I'm not brave enough, like Aaron, to go out there. And I mean, this is why I love doing this show in particular, talking to other media, because I'm learning things, and I didn't even think about that. But what you said, Aaron, of saying I'm gonna say it anyway because if I don't, I look like an idiot. I think that's really important, and I'm gonna take that on board now. But I wanted to ask you as well, both of you. Yeah, do you think it's right to ban media for asking things that you don't like, whatever promotion it is or whatever manager it is? Like Ali Abdelaziz banned ESPN, I think, because Ariel said Leon Edwards deserved a title shot over Gilbert Burns, I think. Do you think it's right to ban people?
I think it's up to them, but I think that the manager has to determine what's in the best interest of their client. If not getting publicity is in the best interest of their client, then don't get publicity. Like, you still are losing something in that equation if you say none of my fighters are going to do interviews with you. If you don't think that their source is something that, because outside of fight week, if somebody requests an interview with someone through the manager has every right to say no. We're not entitled to an interview. But if the manager says none of my people are going to do interviews with you, it depends on what, if I have a big reach and like people watch my content, you're depriving your fighter of getting the ability to promote themselves on that platform. So it's a give and take, right? Like, but I think they're well within their rights to do it if it's like a manager and they don't like the way that you cover. They don't like the way that you cover the sport. I think that it's up to them. It's the same thing happens in football. Like, if there's somebody who's interviewing football players, and an agent feels like they didn't show their athlete in the best light, they could say, well, you're not interviewing any of my clients again. Like, that happens. It's not something that's unique to the MMA sphere.
Yeah. I see what Aaron is saying about that. You know what I mean? Like, it's their choice. It's their decision, but there is a give and take, and there's sometimes, in some situations, one side benefits more than the other, and in some situations both sides benefit. So you gotta, if they don't want to do an interview with you, they don't want to do an interview with you. You know what I mean? It's their choice. It's not like it's right or wrong. I believe it's their choice. It's like me. Like, I'm just fortunate enough to get access to fighters, at the lowest level, at the highest level. They give me their time to interview them, then I give them the full respect, and I'm fortunate to have that. You know what I mean? And my reach is not as big as most other outlets, but them giving me that time, I gotta respect it, and respect their decisions to not allow me to interview their fighters too.
I mean, for me, it's just, yeah, when I have Chatri on sometimes and interview him, and I know I get him because I don't ask him the stuff like about One World and some of the fishier things. Like Luke Thomas was saying recently on his show that he's been trying to get an interview with Chatri, but Chatri probably won't do it because he doesn't want to answer the questions Luke is putting forward. And I know if I ask those, Chetri won't come on the show. So I try and keep it about fights and fighting.
That's the problem, right? Like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you want to answer those questions? Because if people have that perception about your organization, like, why not confront it, right? So you can read into that what you will. If that's the reason why he wouldn't do it.
But I'm like, where do I land on that? Is it wrong of me not to ask those? If I do, he'll never talk to me again.
It's up to you.
Yeah.
You know, people can judge it for however they please, but you're not beholden to anybody but yourself and whoever you work for, right? Like, if somebody says, why didn't you ask this? Like, a lot of people ask Ali Abdelaziz about his past and all that. And if you don't ask it, people are like, why didn't you ask him about this? Well, he's answered it a million times. Like, how many people have to ask this guy the same question before, like, people get, like, well, why? Why do you have to keep asking the guy the same question over and over again? He's not going to give you a different answer. He's not going to be like, you know what, today I'm going to give a different answer to that question. It's not going to happen. So, like, people will always say, like, why didn't you ask this? Why didn't you ask that? It's like, it's not my job is to ask the questions that I want to ask. And I know that we have people that are stakeholders that are going to, that want to know these answers. And I want to know answers too, but I'm not going to, ask somebody the same question they've been asked 100 times because somebody thinks I should ask that question. It's like, it's not up to you.
I'm very wary of certain people that are just focused on that. They're just focused on attacking everybody, like attacking the fighters, attacking the promotions, attacking the managers. I'm very wary because that's almost some people out there are just focused on that like 99.9% of the time. And I almost just like shut them off because there's no balance. I mean, I like media members that have balance. They'll ask these types of questions, but they'll ask this type of questions, and they have different angles that they go with. But it's just like when you're just negative, it's almost like.
But you know what? They're building their audience the way they want to build their audience. Like, if that's the kind of person that they're hoping to attract is people that are interested in that kind of coverage, then that's their prerogative, right? Like, I can't get mad at them. I think that everybody has the ability to decide, how they're, what kind of audience they want, right? Like, if I want to ask a certain type of question that I know is going to draw a certain audience, and like that's important to me, then I can do that. Or if I say, well, that's not really the kind of audience I want to engage with, I feel like that's kind of like, low hanging fruit. You can do that too, right? So again, I think it's up to whoever is covering it or whatever their mandate is from the company they work for.
All right. Well, let's move on to some other topics. We got about 15 minutes left. Usually we do about an hour and a half. So actually 12 minutes left. So I want to get into two more topics. The first one is the Daniel Cormier. He comes out and says that John Jones shouldn't be included into the GOAT conversation because of his PED violations, right? And what are your thoughts on that? And another question to piggyback off that is DC, he's still being tested by USADA. John Jones is moving up to heavyweight. Do you feel like that is the fight to make at heavyweight?
No, I don't think Cormier is going to fight again. I think he's done. I think the reason why I think he's done is because what he said, that when he was watching back that last fight with Stipe, he knew that the younger version of himself could have done a better job at certain things, and had he been the younger version of himself, that wouldn't have happened. Once you make that realization, I think you're out. I think you say, well, my best days are behind me. There's no point in me continuing, especially when you're at a high level like Cormier. You've fought in all these 5-round fights in a row. In terms of the PED thing with John Jones and all of that, and whether or not he can be in or out of the GOAT conversation, I think that's for each individual person to make. Like right now, John is on social media trying to convince everybody of why he should be considered the GOAT. It's like, I think that there's a certain group of people that will never consider him to be the greatest of all time, regardless of what he does. Like, he could go and win the heavyweight championship and defend it 5 times. I think that they're always going to disqualify him for the conversation, and that is their prerogative. There's no real greatest. This greatest of all time thing is it's a water cooler conversation. There's no defined, etched in stone best of all time. John Jones can argue why he thinks he's the best of all time, why he thinks his resume is better than GSP's or Cormier's or whoever's. At the end of the day, it's up for each individual to make that choice. Personally, I think John is the best of all time. And I think that if you look at the best part of his resume, when he was young and he was beating all of these killers at light heavyweight, when light heavyweight was the division in the UFC, and he was beating Machida, Hua, Rampage, Rashad Evans, like he was beating, those guys were like the best of the best guys in the UFC at that time. you know, if you want to disqualify him because of what happened with USADA, you have to remember his best work was when USADA wasn't around, which means that anybody could have been doing what, you know, it was basically the Wild West outside of the in-competition window where the sanctioning bodies were doing the testing. You kind of have to assume that it was a level playing field at the time, right? Like if people had suspected that John was doing something and they were going to face him, they would probably be doing something themselves. I'm not trying to accuse anybody of anything, but it's like the thing I always compare it to Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball refused, like these old writers who decide who's in the Hall of Fame, which I think is ludicrous in and of itself. They keep leaving Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens out, but they're allowing other pitchers and other hitters and other whatever position players into the Hall of Fame from that same era. So if you feel like these people were getting away with something back then, why are you assuming that other people weren't getting away with it? So like you have to choose whether you're going to disqualify an entire era or whether you're going to you know, you can't pick and choose. Like GSP, for example, is from the same era as John Jones. And he did his best work in that era when I think everybody kind of agrees that people during that era were not as clean as the fighters are now. They didn't have to be as clean as they have to be now. So you have to assume, again, everybody was on a level playing field. So if you're going to put GSP in that conversation, GSP has fought once under the USADA umbrella. You have to keep everybody from that era in it or nobody. Because if you're going to just, and I know John Jones has actually, you know, has had adverse test results in the USADA era. But again, I think John's best work was in that era. And that's why I still consider him the greatest of all time. He was running through the best fighters in the UFC and the best division of the UFC at the time. And that's why I think Khabib is in the discussion now too. Like he was the champion of what I think is the best division in the UFC right now. But back then, light heavyweight was the it division. And John Jones ran through that division like it was nothing. He looked like he was way better than everybody. So, you know, John, I just think John is wasting his breath by trying to convince people that will never be convinced that he's the best of all time.
That's true. John is wasting his breath completely on Twitter and wherever else he's posting. To piggyback off what you're saying about the level playing field, I completely agree with that. I feel like it's like even when you look at other sports, like you said, baseball, but then also you got Lance Armstrong and the Tour de France when Lance Armstrong popped what 14 other players.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like
everybody's
doing the same thing. So it's level playing field. Like, and then also I feel like there's that generations are different too. You know, I feel like back in the 2000s, there was a greatest of all time at that time, right? And then the 2010s and in the 1990s, there was the greatest of all time in those eras, in those generation, there's different fighters that dominated and they were the best, you know, and I don't know, like it's hard to say who is the greatest of all time. I personally, it's like GSP. I like GSP, you know, his resume, but John Jones ain't done yet. And that's what makes it so much more interesting. He's not done yet. If he goes to heavyweight and dominates and wins that belt, it's undisputed. He's undisputed, right? It's like he's done everything, you know, you can do and done it for a long period of time. And it's gonna be, and I'm all for it. I'm waiting here to watch it with that. So PEDs or no PEDs, it doesn't matter. Right now they're getting tested, and he's coming back clean. So we'll see what happens in the future with him. Now the last part or the last thing, you know, I always get into with our guests is the MMA Hall of Fame. And who would you induct into the MMA Hall of Fame? You know, this sport started in the early 1990s. And now it is 2020. There's so many fighters that have contributed to the sport in all the promotions around the world. You know, you could go back to the early UFC, Pride, Shudo, Bellator, Strike Force. You know, every promotion. When you look at it and you see a fighter that sticks out to you, Aaron, who do you feel like you would induct into the MMA Hall of Fame, not UFC Hall of Fame?
I would put John Jones in. Like, I mean, if I'm gonna pick I just went and said that I think he's the best of all time. Like, I guess I kind of backed myself into a corner there, but I would put him in the Hall of Fame. You know, I know James Lynch came on and picked GSP, so I can't pick GSP. And you know, GSP certainly belongs in the MMA Hall of Fame. But you know, and you had mentioned to me a fighter, like pick a fighter, because if I'm not picking a fighter, I would put Dana White in the MMA Hall of Fame. Like, the UFC has taken the sport to heights, unimaginable heights over the course of time that this promotion has been operating for. Like, this is a new sport. Like, this sport is still in its embryonic phase, right? Like, and look at how big it is. Like, I just think it's incredible what Zuffa and Endeavor and and Dana in particular have done to build the sport up and make it into the the juggernaut that it is today. So I would put him in if we're opening it up to not just the fighters. I know a lot of people don't like Dana, and I get it, but look at the structure of how he's built this promotion and how he's taken a sport that's very similar to boxing and completely abandoned all of the things that make boxing awful, in my opinion. Like a million titles, a million different governing bodies. Like it's exhausting. I don't know how people follow like who the WBA super flyweight champion is. I don't know how people can keep track of every champion. Like I would love to have a panel of boxing writers sit in front of me, and I would have a list of every boxing champion in the world, and I would say, who is the WBO super welterweight champion right now, and see how many of them knew, because it would impress me if they all knew. But like, there's just so many of them, you can't keep up with it. And Dana White has been able to build, mixed martial arts up in such a fashion where that's not even an issue. So he gets a ton of credit in my books for where the sport's at right now.
With what you said about the sport being in its embryonic phase, and I feel like I also agree with that. It is at the start, and we're just getting started with this worldwide spread of it. This the MMA pandemic, so to say, right? It's just everywhere now, and I love it, and I'm glad that I'm getting into covering the sport now. Don't you think it's so important that a lot of even these young guys, right, that are like 20, 22, you see, like, guys like Cole Shelton and Nolan King and Farah, they're young and they're in the sport, and man, I'm just excited to just see what can happen with them and where they end up in this media space, and even for myself, I'm an old man, but I'm trying to get my foot in the door, and I think like there's room for everybody, so everybody should kind of reach out and help each other if they can, what I mean? And this is also like what I'm doing right now, is like I'm reaching out to other media members and getting them on here and talking with them. And it's not like me and Aaron had some kind of friendly relationship in the past. I reached out and he was nice enough to come on the show, and I really, really appreciate that, Aaron.
Yeah, I will always give people my time, and I agree with you. I feel like the space where we need to all have each other's backs. This is a brand new kind of space, the media space in MMA. And I see so many people when I'm on the road that are like, they paid their own way to go and cover an event because they're so passionate about it. And like that, that makes me so happy to see. And if there's anybody like that ever wants to pick my brain on anything or wants to pull me aside and chat or talk on the phone or go for coffee, like my door is always open to those people, because I want to see as many people succeed in this space as possible and make a name for themselves in this space as possible. It's important to me because I feel like the more credibility we have in the MMA media space and the more people that are doing things the right way and are getting recognition for it, the more it's going to raise all ships in terms of MMA, whether it's promotion, the fighters, the media members. I think that there are so many people that want to cover the sport as a profession, and there are so few that are able to do it. And whenever I get the chance to see people that are really working hard, like the Schmo, for example, when he came on the scene, like he had no following at all for the most part. Like but he was doing things in a way that was unique and different. And I know it's not for everybody, but I really admire how much he's been able to do in the little time that he's been able to do it. And there's no jealousy here for me with anybody that's been able to make a name for themselves in this space. I love seeing it. And when new things come about, like Morning Combat with Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell, like seeing their chemistry continue to grow, and like that show's so much fun to listen to. I love it, and I love seeing people that approach the sport from different angles. Like there was a guy who I don't remember what his Twitter name is, but he focuses on like the marketing angle of MMA, just that one angle, and people, their followings on social media and how they're marketing themselves. And I just love seeing people approach things from unique avenues, because it shows the growth of the sport, that people are able to look at the business of MMA, the gambling side of MMA, all of these different aspects of the sport, the MMA prospects like Sean Bitter, who I mentioned earlier. Like that's what's growing this sport, is seeing people that care about so many different little elements, because we see it in all the other sports already. So to see MMA kind of grow in that fashion has been awesome to see.
Yeah, as the sport grows, the media grows, and more jobs will pop up, and more of these guys, like you said, like Sean and so many guys online you could find that is doing good work. There'll be spots for them. You know, you just got to keep continuing to cover the sport and getting better, and myself included. I'm just trying to be as the best version of myself. You know what I mean? Like you said, the Schmo, man, he's done so well for himself in such a short period of time. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not a fan of him, but I respect his game. I respect his hustle. I respect his grind, and I feel like, man, he's gonna be one of those guys you're gonna see on a major network in the future, and it's gonna be great because he's gonna be pushing the sport.
And even if he's not, I think he likes being his own boss. Like I think he likes building his own brand and doing things his own way, and I applaud him for that too. Like that's really difficult to do.
Yeah,
I met him in Tokyo. He's super nice. I'm sure you deal with him a lot, Aaron. But I like
people
the
think I am him, so I mean, yeah,
yeah.
Him and I get along really well. I like Dave the Schmo.
Dave, yeah,
he's a really good dude. I like him.
It's funny. He just came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Dave," and I wanted to say,
Yeah.
"No, you're not. You're the Schmo." But yeah, no, he's really nice. Helen's nice as well. She was there. And
oh yeah, Helen's great. And Helen's
I
been
agree,
doing
yeah.
this longer than he has. Like Helen's been. I remember the first time I covered. It was the MMA Fighter Awards, the red carpet for that. I was right next to Helen. I've known Helen for many years as a result of that. And she does an awesome job too. And I mean, her and the Schmo are kind of a unit now, and they do such great work.
Yeah, they're doing.
Yeah, they
a lot.
Like
of
one of them will
content.
hold the camera, won't they, while the other one interviews?
Yeah.
And then, God, I need someone like that.
Yeah, I do all my own camera stuff. When I'm on the road, it's just me and my tripod. Like I don't have somebody that shoots my stuff. A lot of people don't realize that. I'm framing my own shots. I'm doing all the tech stuff on my own, and I think that's kind of a fun part of it.
I have to get of people don't realize that.
To hold it sometimes for me because my camera kept moving from side to side. It was broken. I'm like, can you just hold this in place? Well, yeah.
Well, Aaron, man, we've done 90 minutes. Thank you, man, again so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll have you on in the future. We're continuing this concept of having all the Canadian media members come on. I haven't had James, Tom Taylor. Next week we'll have Adam Martin. The week after we'll have Cole Shelton, and then we had Craig from Fight Nights Picks, who does great breakdowns of fights. Yeah, man, it's just I don't know. I just got this love for Canada. I don't know why. I've never even been there.
Yeah, Adam lives like 5 minutes from me. He worked as an intern when I worked with him at the network called The Score. He was an intern when I worked with Mauro Ranallo on the MMA show. So I've known Adam for like 10 plus years now. He's an awesome guy, and he's always hustling away. Also, he's got a really great mind for MMA.
Yeah, if you guys are watching, make sure to subscribe, like, share, and follow Aaron on Twitter. Man, he puts out a lot of great content. You got anything coming up that you could give us? That you might want to tell everybody about?
Just the TSN MMA show. Every week I'm doing interviews. I tend to keep it to audio. I'm more of a consumer of audio myself, so I have a hard time watching. Although I just got a YouTube Premium account, and I like that I can listen in the background on my iPhone. So I highly recommend YouTube Premium if you want to be able to not have to look at video when you're listening to stuff, if you like to consume it that way. But TSN MMA show, it's a weekly podcast. We actually do 2 a week. One is myself and Bazooka Joe Valtellini, the play-by-play. The color analyst and former champion of Glory Kickboxing. We talk MMA, all the big subjects, and then I actually recently split the show up into 2. So one episode is just interviews that I do over the course of the week, and the other one is myself and Joe. So you'll get 2 episodes a week from us. It's wherever podcasts are found, and I'm looking to grow that audience if I can. And you can follow me on Twitter at Aaron Bronsteter.